United States Navy retired. United States Senator Mark Amodei. And State Senator Greg Brower. Our panelists this evening: Michael Haggerty, News Director for KMPD TV. Sean Patrick, morning show host on FM 99.1. And Karen Todd Griffin, News 4's morning show anchor. We've got a pretty simple format for this evening, and I think it'll move very fast. Basically, I'll ask questions, the panel will ask questions, and we'll expect a 90-second answer, and then if necessary, a 30-second follow-up. You guys can sit down, right? Make yourselves comfortable, you can be here a while. And we'll get through a whole bunch of questions, and we hope the topics that you are interested in. So is everybody ready? Yes. Do you have a microphone? So our first question is somewhat two-parted here. Much has been said about President Obama's omission to ask for any form of congressional approval for military action against Libya. If you were in Congress and President Obama had asked for congressional authority to attack Libya, would you have voted to authorize military action? Should Congress assert its constitutional authority and insist that the President ask Congress for a declaration of war before America's military is deployed? And in addition, the United States has troops stationed in over 150 countries around the world. Military action is ongoing in Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, Libya, and now most recently in Yemen. Is it America's place to be the policeman of the world? Should we continue to expand our military engagements overseas, or should we bring our troops home?
Is that a 90-second question, Sam? I will attempt in 90 seconds to cover as much of that as I can recall. First and foremost, before you talk about a declaration of war, you probably want to take a stop at the War Powers Act. It's been more than 60 days in the War Powers Resolution. It's been more than 60 days in Libya. Congress ought to have insisted upon compliance with the rules. If you went back to a George Bush type of era, if President Bush had done this, there would have been folks going nuts all over the place. We should have insisted for those folks in Congress that the President comply with the War Powers Resolution for a declaration of war, obviously, but then also we need to pivot to areas that are, what is the objective, what is the plan for achieving that objective, and what is the exit strategy? Whether it's the Powell Doctrine, overwhelming force, achieve the objective and get out, or something else. There is no fit, set plan for every single circumstance, but clearly the President has totally disregarded the authority of Congress. If I were in Congress at the time, if we could not enunciate what the objective was, what the time frame was, and what the exit strategy was, I would not have supported it.
So the second part of the question was, should the United States be the policeman of the world, or should we start bringing troops home?
No, I don't think our role is as the policeman of the world. I think you need to evaluate your tactical objectives, your economic objectives, and all other objectives that are relevant to that. The world is becoming a much more dangerous place. There are more members of the nuclear club. You have national security issues that must be protected, so we don't avoid another 9/11 situation. You have border issues that relate to national security, but you also have national treasure in the form of money and in the form of our sons and daughters. So, the policeman of the world is out. You have to enunciate clear objectives. You have to do that with a cost-benefit analysis and value judgment related issues.
Thank you very much. Commander? Same question.
Same question. The President should have gone to Congress and should have sought their authority, and failure to get that authority, you should not have deployed troops into Libya. The fact that he did do that is he could do that for a period of time, but at the end of that time, as we are coming up right now, Congress should exercise its authority to make the President either articulate the objectives that they agree with for why we are involved, what our national security interests and what the exit strategy is so that we know once we achieve the objective, what are we going to do? Keep people there, bring them home, or how we're going to evaluate them. So right now, had I been in Congress, I would have allowed the president to execute his authority for a period of time, allowed under the War Powers Resolution. But after that, he owes it to the American people to be explaining what he's doing and why, or get those troops out of there and bring them home and disengage.
What about being the world's policeman?
Regarding the world's policeman, we are not the world's policeman, nor should we ever put ourselves or our troops in that position. We should engage as necessary to secure our national security interests and those of our allies to ensure that this country stays safe, not only now but in the future as well. If we need to anticipate where attacks might come from and take necessary action to deter them, we should do that. If we have to take action in order to attack, in order to make sure that we are achieving those objectives, we do it. But the reality of it is we are not the world's policemen and should not be putting troops anywhere around the world to achieve anything like that.
Should we be bringing the troops home?
Right now, I think you look at each situation individually. When you look at Afghanistan and how we are engaged there and what our objectives are, when you look at that crescent that goes all the way from China through Pakistan to the other side of Afghanistan where you have Iran, being engaged in that region, I believe, is in our national interest to stay engaged there. When you look at Iraq, we are winding down. We're going to start bringing those troops home. We've clearly brought back the combat troops. We're next going to start bringing back those support troops. If the Iraqi government chooses to ask us to stay there, and we deem that it is in our national interest to do so, I think the president should do a job in evaluating our presence.
And that is time. Thank you, sir. Senator?
Thank you very much, Sam. I fundamentally have three problems with what the president is doing in Libya. Number one, as was discussed, he did not seek congressional approval. This president should know by now that his political popularity, if you will, is not at an all-time high, even for him. He should not be acting unilaterally without congressional approval. Number two, he has failed to articulate the national security interest that we are pursuing in Libya. And I'll tell you what, when I served on active duty on a U.S. Navy warship, I'll tell you that the men I served with and I were always happy to do whatever it took, to pay any price, to bear any burden, wherever we might be sent in the world to accomplish a mission. But we wanted to know why we were doing it. We wanted to know what the national security interest at stake was. This president has not articulated that, and I think that has caused a cynical public to become even more cynical about his policy there. And finally, it's expensive, as we all know, to conduct military operations halfway around the world. It's expensive in terms of stretching our resources too thin. It's expensive in terms of dollar cost, and it's expensive in terms of the potential treasure, in terms of lives, when we put our men and women into harm's way. So this president, in my opinion, has not effectively and adequately weighed any of those three factors in pursuing our policy in Libya, and I would not have supported it were I a member of Congress.
Thank you very much. Yes, you have time.
We clearly are not the world's policemen. Here's the way I would evaluate our deployments around the world and our troops stationed around the world if I was the president or if I was in Congress. It has to be reevaluated every day. We have to ask ourselves as members of Congress or in the executive branch, does it make sense in terms of our national security interests to have troops in a particular location? If the answer to that is no, then we obviously need to reevaluate the policy. The bottom line needs to be our national security interest, not what another country might want, not what NATO might want, not what the UN might want, but does it serve our national security interests as a country?
Thank you very much, Senator. The next question comes from Sean Patrick.
I guess we'll direct this to, Commander Lippold can answer first. Federal deficit is now at $14 trillion in counting. A plan that significantly cuts federal spending is introduced and includes a tax increase. Would you vote in favor of it? Or would you vote no simply on the principle of being against raising taxes? And how would you vote on raising the debt ceiling if that vote occurred while you were in Congress?
I would not raise taxes. Right now, Washington DC doesn't have a tax and spend problem. They have a spend problem. They need to get spending under control. Raising taxes is just give them an opportunity to spend our taxpayer money that much quicker and faster. And the other question was?
Debt ceiling.
Raising the debt ceiling.
Raising the debt ceiling. I would not vote to raise the debt ceiling unless there were a corresponding decrease in the amount of spending to offset it, and it had teeth in it to make sure we held to it. So I would not support raising the debt ceiling unless we had corresponding reductions.
Yeah, that's an easy one. I have fought during my time in Carson City to balance our state's budget without raising taxes, and I would do the same in Washington. We do have a spending problem in Washington. We do not have a revenue problem. Unless we get a handle quickly on the deficit and the national debt, we are never going to come out of it. We're going to leave our children and grandchildren with a situation that is simply untenable and immoral, in my view. And with respect to the debt ceiling, I can't imagine the logic in raising the debt ceiling at this point, given the fact that it's over $14 trillion. I just don't get it. How does it make sense to borrow more money so we can increase spending, as opposed to simply cutting spending, reducing the deficit, paying down the national debt, and getting this country back on the path toward economic prosperity? That's my view.
And actually, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to follow up. So you would be in favor of the country defaulting on its debt by not raising the debt ceiling? And also, would you be willing to look at entitlements and the cuts that you would have to make there? Because as they say, that's where the money is.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of the country defaulting, Sam. I'm not sure. There's a dispute out there amongst economists as to the real effect of not raising the debt ceiling. There are economists who do not predict the economic calamity that some economists who favor raising the debt ceiling predict. We need to take that seriously, but I just can't imagine how raising the debt ceiling at this point makes sense. Now, if we could couple an increase in the debt ceiling with the kind of significant spending reforms and reductions that virtually everyone in this room would say is worth it, well, I think we need to take a look at that. But raising the debt ceiling without some kind of unprecedented reform in the way we spend money as a federal government is a non-starter for me. And the final part, Sam?
Would you be willing to look at entitlements and make major cuts in Medicare and Social Security, which is where the money is?
Let me first of all say that I don't view Medicare and Social Security as entitlements. Those are programs that folks have paid into their entire lives. They are government programs, but I don't see them as entitlement programs. Clearly, they need to be reformed.
Okay,
Medicaid, Social Security, Medicare are not sustainable in their current form. We have to do something.
Okay, that's where we have to leave it. Thank you. Senator Amodei?
Thank you, Sam. The question has as its base a credibility issue. Do you trust the federal government to do the appropriate things with respect to budget? And do you trust them to do the appropriate things with respect to raising the debt ceiling? And I can tell you in the circles I've been traveling in, there is no credibility for that. So if you go back there, I think when you talk about the debt ceiling, if you raise the debt ceiling, you will get more debt. It is not clear that if you don't raise it, the world's going to come to an end. And you know what? I can tell you that if you keep continuing to raise the debt ceiling and you continue to get more debt, all of the problems that are at the precipice right now will get more exacerbated. So no on the debt ceiling. But then the second part is this. The second part is, well, what about balancing the budget? And then you get into, and this is an experience thing, which is, well, how long are you going to do it? How long is it going to take? Is it something that a subsequent Congress is going to be able to walk away from that commitment? So when you start talking about placing multiple conditions on, I will vote to raise this if this or this or this happens, my response would be, it better be ironclad, because there's been ironclad before that has come out of the Potomac neighborhood, and it isn't ironclad. And if you don't feel that the present financial situation where you have money that you owe to your chief competitor economically and militarily in the world, China, where you are financing that debt through southern centers that are not our friends, and we are mortgaging basically our national security and our very economy, I think if it causes some balls to hit the ground, maybe we ought to take a look at what that mess is, because I think I know the mess that we're coming for. So I would not say more debt in exchange for a balanced budget amendment unless there's a specific enforceable time frame. And I also would want a supermajority in case you raised any taxes, similar to what we have in Nevada, because at least then it's not 51 to 49.
Okay, the next question comes